What if I try to explain Buddhism without using any Buddhist terms? Right? And there's a reason for this. In April this year, a group from Senshin Temple, 24 of us, went to Bhutan, and half of them were there for the third time, so we've been 3 times to Bhutan. And Bhutan's a really interesting country because it's a Buddhist country, predominantly Tibetan Buddhist, and it's only had Western influence for the past 40 years. That's it. It was very recent. And when us Buddhists go to Bhutan, it makes you realize very quickly how un-Buddhistic we are, how really Christian we are. And that was something I was not used to. You know. And I was forced to think about this. If you're born and raised like I was in America, and your native language is English, you're Christian. Your whole orientation is Christian. Your values are Christian. How you define religion is from a Christian point of view. So even though I call myself a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist searching for what Buddhism really is. Right? And that comes powerfully clear when you go to a place like Bhutan. Right? The Bhutanese basically have the Tibetan form of Buddhism, although they have no allegiance to the Dalai Lama whatsoever. They have their own spiritual head. And it's a monastic system with one exception. Jodo Shinshu is the only, of all the traditional schools of Buddhism, it is the only married clergy that is not monastic at all. There's one exception, that's a Nyingma, the Nyingma Pa, in Tibetan system. They also have a married clergy. And in Bhutan, the official monastic system is called Drukpa. Right? But in every Inaka town, in every little town, country town you go to in Bhutan, the Nyingma are the priests, monks. They're not monks, they're priests, because they marry, and their children inherit the temple. Right? And it is almost scary how similar they are to Jodo Shinshu priests. It's kind of like, are you sure you're Nyingma? You know, look, I test it. They have the same kind of almost naughty sense of humor. They're very straightforward. They're not purists in any sense of the word, right? And yet they're strict. They're very moral people. And Bhutan is a paradox in that way. And it's just opened up to the West in the last 40 years. So now that TV and this has hit town, it's changing very quickly, and probably the old culture will die within another generation. Right? Thanks to people like us who go there. And so I told, we've had the same tour guide for the 3rd time, so I said, you know, if you're really smart, you won't let us come back anymore because we're going to kill you next time. And we will. Our American dollars will destroy the whole culture. But while it's there, the Japanese in particular are fascinated with it. 65% of all tourists to Bhutan are from Japan. Many of them are priests because they want to know, before the onslaught of the West, what was Buddhism really like? And it's remarkable. Right? The Bhutanese, they have very strange sexual habits. I'll start from there because they're very moral people and very ethical people, much more so than New York. And yet, they say that when a young couple gets married, neither the boy nor the girl should be virgin. They should be experienced before they get married. Right? So I said, wow, your dating must be out there, you know. And they said, yeah, it's called second story. Right? Bhutanese houses are 3-story houses, they're huge things. And several families live there. The store or livestock is on the 1st floor, the families live on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor is half open. It's a roof, there's no walls, so that air can pass through for drying of crops. So everyone's on the 2nd floor. That's why dating is called second floor. If you're interested in a girl, you go at night and you kind of tick at each window to find where she is, where her room is. If she lets you in, bingo. Doesn't that cause an awful lot of accidental pregnancies? Oh, yeah. So I said, well, what do you do? Well, we have a party. We have to call the boys' parents. They come over. They have a big party, big feast. And then at the end of the party, the boy and girl have to announce whether they want to get married or not. If they do, they're married. There's no ceremony. They just move in. It's matriarchal society, so the boy moves into the wife's household. So he moves in. If they decide not to, then the girl's family raises the child. It's that simple. Right? Bhutan has one of the highest divorce rates in the world, but it's an amicable divorce rate. They said, okay, we got married, we had children, we're obligated to raise them and send them to school. Once that's done, if you want to do something else, go ahead. And they do, regularly. Right? And like the old Japanese, this may be a surprise to you, but the chances are your great-grandmother had no last name. Because peasants in Japan did not have a last name. They only had first name. Bhutan, to this day, they only have first name. Not only that, it's really confusing. There are only about 30 first names. And not only that, out of the 30 first names, only 5 of them are specifically female. So you may have a girl with the same name as a boy. Right? And there are only 30 names. So I said, isn't this kind of confusing? And they said, well, yeah. So I said, how do you tell one Tenzin from the next Tenzin? He said, well, if you need to do that, then one of the Tenzin takes another first name. So it'll be Tenzin Dorji as opposed to Tenzin Tenzin. It was all around like this. So their sexual habits are very different. The most famous Bhutanese reformist monk in Bhutanese history in the 12th century chose as his symbol of his movement an erect penis ejaculate with a ribbon tied around it. Right? And it was a symbol that the priests had reduced Buddhism to a formula, a dead formula. And they were not missing the whole point of waking up to the joy of life. So that became a symbol. Right? You drive through Bhutan and have farmhouses with these huge paintings on the side of the wall. And it's an erect penis ejaculated with a little bow tie around. And you're going, oh, you know. And it freaks the tourists out, because hanging from the bus driver's rearview mirror is a tiny little penis carved. And they're given as gifts to each other. How they look at this symbol and how we look at it is entirely different. I haven't figured out how they look at it yet, but it is not the way we take it. Right? And it's always on the tourist route, because that's what us foreigners are fascinated with. But they do not look at it that way. My daughter, who is now studying Tibet, the tour guide that we're very close to now, said to my daughter, why don't you translate some of these from Tibetan into English and I'll publish it for you. So she said, okay, let me think about it. Right? And he was so happy about it that when I left the second trip, he had a card, a penis about this big, to give to my daughter as a present. And I'm going, this guy's giving me a carved penis to give to my daughter as a present. Right? Nothing of the sort occurred to him. I'm absolutely positive. He was just so grateful that Manny was going to try to translate some of his poetry. He carved this penis for him. Spent all night painting it red and everything. It was very strange. Having said that, they are the most gentle, they're a tough breed. They're all not respectful. There's no rules, you just walk. They're the gentlest people I have ever met. They're honest to whatever. They're scrupulous. They will walk a mile to bring something. And that kind of thing. So, and the second trip, well, this last trip, we named the tour Butsu Tour.
Yeah,
That's the name of
he's
the
also
bus sign. Because our group really
yeah,
mumbles
static
a lot.
noises.
he complained a lot.
If we can
So,
turn
and complaint was
turn up a little.
so the second trip was also Monko, no, this was Monko, the second trip was Butsu, right? And so, Tentem, our tour guide, said, well, what does that mean? You know, I said, well, you know, it means to always have a comment about something, to complain about something. You know? I said, how do you say that in Songkran? And he could not think of the word for it. Right? I said, come on, there's got to be a word for that. I mean, the Japanese don't have a word for it. We die in 24 hours. Right? And sure enough, he could not find a word for it. He asked everybody. He said, I don't know. So we said, okay, keep an eye out. Right? After 2 weeks in Bhutan, we got together and we said, how many saw complaints? Everybody raised their hand. I said, who? They're pointing to each other. Right? Us. We were the complainants. We did not find a single case of any Bhutanese complaining about anything. Okay? When I come home, my daughter's in Santa Barbara studying Tibetan, and she doesn't know about this incident. So I called her and I said, look, ask your Tibetan friend, is there a word for to complain in Tibetan? I said, okay. So the next day she calls, and she says, yeah, there is. But you know, something funny. I said, what? She said, they don't know how to use it in a sentence. They know the word, but I said, well, how do you use it? And they couldn't use it in a sentence. My assumption is there are people on this earth for whom the word or the concept of complaining is non-existent. I can't imagine it, especially with Japanese. That's all we do. But it must exist. And if you look at these people, it could be. It could be. And they won't complain. And so this time I asked them again, are you sure? Yeah, I can't find a word. And I said, do you know what I'm talking about? He said, what's the word? So it's a remarkable thing. So the Japanese are fascinated with it because it is telling them what Buddhism was before the impact of Western thinking. And it's only 40 years out of it. So if you got, it's not that expensive, you should go. Anyway, so the idea came to me that we spend a lot of our time juggling Buddhist terms that we know nothing about, but it sounds good, like Buddha's compassion. Right? What the hell is Buddha's compassion? Come on. Right? Does it mean nice to people? Does it mean love? Do you know the doctrine in Jodo Shinshu? Human beings are incapable of practicing compassion. This is doctrine. Human beings are recipients of compassion. They are not givers of it. And the way it's used in, I don't know about your temple, but the way it's used in temples in LA, when somebody doesn't like what you're saying, they'll say, hey, Sensei, where's your Buddhist compassion? Right? They use it in the terms of compassion means to indulge someone. And trust me, in Japan, Buddhist compassion is not indulging somebody. They'll hit you with a stick. The Zen school has a kyosaku. They carry a stick. You want compassion? Bend over. And they do. Buddhist compassion in the schools that are considered capable of practicing it is very rigorous. It is not indulging somebody. It's one of these. Remember Bacha? Hurrah! Bam! That's Buddhist compassion. It's not letting you become the world owes me everything, and at the age of 20-something, you become a killer like that guy in Santa Barbara. That kid thought the world owed him everything. And I don't even know if the parents thought. They did everything they could to try to give him some treatment, and who knows? But he felt that the girls he approached, who shied him on, it was unacceptable. Right? Come on, if you're a guy, you got to get shot down at least 3 times. You know, otherwise you have asked, right? You got to get shot down. It's not the girl's fault, right? But it's so much that way that the world now owes me a living. This is happening more and more even in our Dharma schools. And it's not from the kids, it's from the parents who taught them that. Tonight, we have a summer program from 1st to 6th grade, 8 hours a day for a month. You come. And the culmination is tonight. More and more, we have kids who said, their parents or mom said, that if they feel uncomfortable about anything we're doing, they don't have to do it. So I called the mother. I said, did you tell your son that? He said, of course. He should not be subjected to anything uncomfortable. So I said, okay, then I'll return your money. You take this kid back. Because if that's his attitude, he cannot learn anything. Learning is painful. Hello? It's trying to get something into that you don't have, right? Learning is an uncomfortable process. That's why it's called learning, right? For the age of 7th grader, you cut that off, you're going to be a serial killer. I think. Because the whole world owes you something. This is not, by any means, compassion. Okay? So this is for the idea of trying to explain why we're committed to this thing without using terminology. Because it's a way of evading what it really means. Okay? So here goes. If I use a Buddhist term, raise your hand. Long time ago, there was this guy. Probably now they think about 600 BC rather than 500. Who was a rich kid, came from a Beverly Hills kind of family, had everything he wanted, got married, and that still was bored stiff with it. He had a cut kid, and still was bored stiff. Right? In the meantime, he finally comes to my part of town in LA from Beverly Hills and sees old age, sickness, dead person, right? And a couple of monks running around. Right? And it shocks him that people actually grow old. They look like this after a while. Right? And your hair gets this color. Although some of you deny that, still dying. But anyway, naturally it's this color. And everything that you once were proud of heads south. Right? And there's no way to prevent that. Then you get sick, your body doesn't do what you want it to do, and then you die. And this guy said, is that all there is? I mean, that's it in life? There must be something, another way of looking at it. So he abandons his wife and child, leaves it with his old man, and his mother has long since died, and leaves. So like some hippie going to San Francisco. And he leaves. And he studies under, he does the most in things of meditation. He studies under two masters, two forms of meditation. And he says, this is really nice. This is really nice. I'm really calm while I'm meditating. But when I wake up, it's the same old drag. Right? It doesn't work. Right? So he leaves the company of these friends and just wanders around by himself. And then he got so exasperated, he wasn't getting anywhere. Right? He starved himself almost to death. He said, this ain't gonna work, so he starts eating. He was so exasperated. He says, okay, I'm gonna sit under this tree, and if I die, fine. But I am not moving from this place until I get some kind of idea of what's going on. And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, he wakes up. He goes, wow, okay. And that's the beginning of our religion. And that's all it's about. That's all it's about. What did this guy see under this tree? Right? And it has nothing to do with what he saw, but what he saw as an experience. What did he experience under this tree? Right? From that day forward, it is not about believing in something. It is not about faith at all. It's what did this guy see, and how can I become the same kind of person? All schools descended from that one experience. Stood up into all kinds of schools, disagreeing on what he saw and how to get to it. Mainly how to get to it. But even basically, we disagree on what he saw. So he said, I'm awake. This is what he said, I'm awake. He didn't say, I understand everything. He says, I'm awake. I'm awake to what's really going on. And all the subsequent schools split up, disagreeing on what that was and how to get to it. Even though we all share this teaching in common. One school, was called the Northern School, says that what he saw was the reality of life, and that life was a single organism. A single organism. There is no such thing as an individual. None. It's a fake. It's relatively real, but ultimately, when you ask what this is, you cannot answer that question, because there is nothing. It's a fake, through and through. Right? If you believe that, right, you cannot be. You can't be an American, for one thing.
I gotta be me. I have to have a strong self-image. Well, what about my me?
Right? And Buddhism says, forget you. That's your problem. That's why you're such a mess. Always me. Me first, me second. And if I have time for you, still me. And that's how we are. I don't know about Canada, but American society increasingly is becoming this way. It's very selfish, but we are a profoundly comfortable, unhappy people. We're very comfortable and very unhappy. We blame it on you people, or whoever, certainly not us. And that's this guy's analysis was, you ignore the fact that this is not real. You cling to the fact that this is what's real and what really counts when push comes to shove. That's why you're a mess. And you always will be until you learn to let that go. So, the problem that we think, well, how do you let it go? Well, this is the only thing that sticks to you. Everything in your wicked life tells you this is real. Right? So, some schools say, okay, since you're so addicted to logic, let's approach you logically. What are you? You cannot answer that question. There's no way. I'm happy. That's describing what's taking place here. That's not the question. What is this that's saying is happy? Well, I'm unhappy. Well, what is it that's saying it's unhappy? I'm a religious person. That's available. What is this person? What is this that's saying that I'm this? Say, well, I said this in Japan. Really stupid answer. Typically American. I told Sensei, I'm my mother's son. Wise ass answer, right? And he said, I didn't ask you how you related to some woman. I'm asking you, what are you? And you can't answer that. Oddly, you can answer only in one of two ways. I tell you what this does, or how this is related to somebody else. I cannot tell you what it is. And this particular religion says there's a very good reason for it. There is nothing substantially real about you, separate from everything else. You cannot tell me what personality you have without your mother and father being a part of it, and a real part of it. Not only that, without your friends, and more than that, without your enemies. Your enemies do you great favors because you don't become that. We're still connected. You cannot define anything without its opposite. You can't go up unless you got it down. Right? Vancouver was hot today because I know what cold is in Vancouver. Right? You cannot think of hot without cold. If hot depends upon cold, how real can hot be by itself? And yet we believe hot is a real entity, a separate entity.
Kodani is real.
Don't laugh, you're dude, everybody's and it's connected. Whatever you do affects everything. Everything. And everything that you come across affects you. This is why Obon is not. It's called the gathering of joy. It's not Yaha joy. It's a gathering of joy in remembering the dead. It's to be joyfully remembering the dead, which we very often do not do because we're too busy Not in the Buddhist Terminology. Right? When you dance, you are to remember the dead. The dead. D-E-A-D, dead, dead, dead. And if I did this in America, they'd think I'm crazy. You don't talk about death. You say, oh, you know, passed away. Yeah, she passed away, she died. And the older tradition that we come out of, our grandparents' tradition, they talk about death all the time. Always. They would check out, they had checklists for how you looked in your coffee. Where the makeup was good. Look at this one. What's your name? What's this? Oh, okay. When I die, take it there. And then they comment at everything. The flowers. On the food. You always eat that. Food. What is that? Food. They're always critiquing funeral. What's the nature of death, right? After death, what else is there? I mean, after birth, right? The only big thing you got to worry about is dying, right? And that's what this religion addresses itself. Why is it that we cling to this as a separate theme so strongly that as we get older and approach death, we're horrified to the point of not even wanting to talk? The East Side generation talked about funerals all the time. They traded notes with each other, saying, you probably go first, what you want, I'll make sure you get it. Right? The following week, you would say to me, I'm supposed to go first, but you don't look that good, what do you want? Right? This conversation took place every week. It was hilarious. We're one of the few groups in America that joke about death and funerals and caskets. I said, what? This is true. This is absolutely true. This woman friend of mine who is now, she and her husband are dying of cancer. And it's been going on for about 2 years. And so, at her mother's hoji, we're out eating Chinese food, of course. We're eating Chinese food. And she says, Grandma, don't retire until I die, because you know, when I die, I want you to put that little machine in my coffin. So when you push the button, my hand goes up and goes and waves. Right? He said, I don't want one of these, I want the Queen's wave. And she's saying this about herself. Right? One of the relatives, distant relatives, who were not Buddhist, she was appalled. Hear us talk this way, right? We're on this, I was on stitches, I was on the floor. We were hysterical laughing. And her jaw dropped, so we had to stop and explain to her. No, it's okay, it's okay. But that's the first time I realized how strange it was sound. And she said, I'd like to have a Queen. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? Or, for me, you shouldn't have. That kind of thing. Right? This takes place all the time. What it means is, and our kids do, our kids are very used to this from a very early age, because they're always going to show them the stuff. And they see the open casket, which is always open casket, if at all possible. The only exception I remember was during the Vietnam War, when kids came home in pieces. That was closed. But other than that, it's always an open casket. Why? Because you are to look upon the face of death. You are to accept them as much as you accept life. Why? Because they're opposite sides of the same coin. We do not believe this. But the degree to which you understand the opposite sides of the same coin, life and death become one thing. Namo and Amitabha become one thing. So it's not something separate. In all this conversation, right, it says there's something wrong about the way we look at the world. We're attached to the idea that the whole universe is filled with independent entities bumping into each other. And how they bump into each other and how they relate makes for peaceful or warlike activity. And this guy said, no, that's not true. There's only one organism, and you're part of it. You're a part of everything. You're not separate from it. You can't even define what you are separate from it. You can only define what you are as a part of it. If that's the case, you aren't talking about me all the time. You should be talking about us or you. So the whole enemy becomes your own ego. Egoism is the ultimate enemy that blocks out all reality. your ego. A few schools, the Yin one is one of them. And our school is not the same. You control it by seeing that you can't control it. And it's not trying to get rid of me. You dump it. So it can't hurt you. You say, self-centeredness, here I go again. You catch yourself increasingly being self-centered, being self-controlled, trying to control other people. Read to which you see that. It doesn't kill you. It doesn't push you or other people. It becomes, it's there. It's very much there. But it's diffused. And you had nothing to do with it. You didn't diffuse it. You just saw what you were doing. And in that seeing is diffused. This is called not your own power. It's somebody else. Not somebody. It's a power other than the power of your own ego. You cannot use your ego to defeat ego. It's not built that way. That's what our school poses. How can your ego defeat ego? You can't. It can only be made to see itself. And in that moment, it is so embarrassed, it doesn't hurt it. And you can enjoy whatever it is. Therefore, there are no absolutes one way or the other. There's no absolutely good or absolutely bad. There is no such thing as an absolutely bad person or an absolutely good person. Each person has its good moments and its bad moments. And you go round and round and round. This is a very different point of view. And Bhutan is the first country I've ever encountered in all countries of this religion I've been to. Well, you can see it. It's working. It's so much a part of their life. They're unaware of it. I don't think they even see it. But it's there. It's very much there. They never say, well, I will. You wouldn't. It's good for you. I don't like it, but it's good for you. And then they give their own opinion, but it's not a war. Take it or leave it. My way or the highway. This is really disgusting talk. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. This is disgusting. Only an idiot can say something. You're everything in between as well. We're everything. And those horrible things that human beings have done, if you've seen it, you're capable of doing it. You are. And if you know that, you are less likely to do so. If you say, not me, it's going to happen. This is a very different kind of, nothing's clear in it. It's not absolute this or absolute that. Nothing's absolute. Nothing's absolute. And some schools, you have to do this full time. You can't be bothered with everyday life, with clothes, makeup, how your hair looks, preparing food. So you leave that society. And the society supports you. You shave your head, you don't have to worry about it. Makeup, how you look. Once a month, sometimes shave your head. Every morning you go out and beg for food. What you get, you eat. That's it. Only three pieces of clothing. No movies, no shows, no music, nothing. You concentrate on this. That's okay if you're a college student. That's what college students do. It's a free ride. Mm-hmm. But if you're working, you've got a farm to till. You can't. And it's our school. You got stuff to do. So how do you see yourself in everyday life? You can't. Except what we came up with was what you guys are doing right now. Without this group meeting and doing stuff together, you'll never see it. You have to help each other see it. You don't say, aha, there it is. No. In a situation that arises, the person himself sees it. And when he does, he changes. It does. It's not miraculous change. You're not floating on air, you don't hear bells and chanting. But that change takes place. And over a lifetime, as you approach death, you can make jokes about your best friends, make up and coffee. You can. And they do. She never looked that good when she was alive. Right? And she's talking about her best friend. And everybody laughs because they know that joke and they know what it means. So that's it. And it's hard to see if you're born and raised in a tradition where there's right and wrong, black and white. And you either are or you aren't. Our tradition says, no, you're everything. You're everything. And guess what? You can't see it. And so you need to get together to bump into it for yourself. Therefore, it changes the meaning of this temple. The temple is a spiritual hospital. If you're not sick, do not come. You're in the way. Right? What person in the right mind who thinks they're healthy goes to a hospital? Unless to cure other people. But since our hospital, you can't cure, there is no cure. Right? The diagnosis is the cure. I'm sick, therefore I'm healthy. You have to come here. But if you think you're not sick, don't come. Jump out, you get in the way. You get in the way. Or, as happens to every temple, and I'm sure it's this temple as well, and sure it's certainly true of my temple, the Fujinkai, the older they get, the worse they get. Because they want to hold on to everything. It has to be my way. I'm still the best cook after 14 generations. You can't do that. You know why? You already have Alzheimer's. And don't know it. Right? Right? This kind of thing we can talk about. You know why? Because we're going to have it. Right? I'm going to be the most cantankerous Alzheimer's patient you ever heard, because I'm going to be out in little Tokyo on a park bench screaming at everybody that passes by. Right? We're all connected in that way. And we all share positive, negative, and neutral. Everything we share. And that moment of understanding is the whole purpose of our life. It is not to believe in anything. You can believe all you want. It hasn't got you anywhere except you become a meaner person. I'm right, you're wrong. Young kids today, what do they know? They know a lot more than you would imagine. And because you're young, you're less more than you imagine. Right? Same thing. It's the same thing. That's why our group, our family, is vital. You have to come here and duke it out on a regular basis. Otherwise, there's no access. There isn't. You take your favorite turns, you go out with love and peace and so forth. When anybody talks to me about love and peace and good-heartedness, I shut down. I don't want to hear that. Because I don't trust that person. I would turn my back on that person for a minute. But if I meet somebody saying, you know, I really did kill that person. I was so embarrassed when I felt that. This is a healing thing. I trust this person. I really do. It's how to look at what's in here without first instinctively saying, what's it going to make me look like? How is it going to impress or unimpress them? That's why if you notice when you come here, whether you're backbone or not, chanting is the hardest thing to do. Because you're worried about how you're going to sound to people. Right? That's it. It has a higher the correct pitch right there. His is correct. I can't go that high, so I just go like that. But it took me a long time not to be embarrassed to do that. Because I'm worried about it. What are they going to think I'm doing? Chanting is supposed to be whatever your voice is. Don't worry about who's sitting next to you, but we always do. We always do. And that's good too. That's all right. So be embarrassed to chant. Because sooner or later you're going to just chant. Be embarrassed to dance. Because sooner or later you just dance. And when you just dance for the first time in your life, you'll remember somebody who has died, to whom you are deeply still connected to. You cannot be what you are now without that person now. People do not die in the past. That record remains with you forever. As long as you share. Those people are you. You're not like them. They are you. They produce you. And you carry them all the while. So once a year we're asked to remember the dead. And this remembrance is called the gathering of joy. We take the gathering of joy to mean, just go yaha and have a good egocentric time. It doesn't mean that at all. But you forget your ego to the point where you can remember somebody who has died. And that's for joy. Joy is different from happiness. Happiness is for pig. Happiness is for egocentric maniacs whose only Joy is the moment you have giving that up, letting it go. Life is not just happy. If you're happy, you gotta have the opposite. But the opposite doesn't have to kill you or cripple you. It can just be a part of your life. You know, when you go overseas and go on vacation, you don't remember the good times or the perfect hotel or perfect this. This is when you did something embarrassing or something embarrassing happened to you. Wasn't that a great thing? That's all you talk about. You talk about it and talk about your embarrassed. Why is that? Because it's true, that's why. It's true. You go to a fancy hotel, it just affirms what you have in your mind about that hotel. If you run into a problem, what you remember is how you reacted and how you dealt. And that's true. That's called joy. The other is happiness. You don't need happiness. You've got that all over the place. So that's, if you can talk about what this stuff means to you, then a very interesting thing happens. If that's the case, what is that? What is that? Right? Gold leaf piece of wood. It's a very expensive gold leaf piece of wood, by the way. Ours got stolen. So we had to figure out how much it would cost to replace it. It came back. Guys who tried to sell it to a Pentecostal minister down the street who I knew. So the minister said, "You got more of this?" So he said, "Yeah." So he went to the car. In the meantime, go ahead and call the police and arrest him. So we went to his house. There it was. It had a scratch here. So I called the pen. I said, "They have this scar here. Can we fix it? You got me. You have to strip the whole thing and re-lacquer it and then gold it." So I said, "How much?" He said, "About $15,000. The statue itself this is worth nothing." I should have told you that. So our board said, "The neighborhood in there, that's a good scar." Ours had a scar. But what is it? What does that mean? Obviously, it's not God. Obviously, it's not a creator. Obviously, you cannot talk to it. Or if you do, shut up. Right? It's not going to answer you in that way. These are all God-centric concepts of what religion is. This is completely absent in our religion. It is not the creator of the universe. He cannot, she cannot, it cannot reward or punish you. It simply represents that which is. And what we're trying to do is figure out what is that which is. And how do I awaken to it? How do I wake up? And it tells us very clearly, you cannot use any tool you have now to accomplish this, except perhaps reason and to meditate. And meditation to us just means to pay attention to what's going on quietly. It's not to think of beautiful thoughts, to close your eyes and think of wonderful places to go. It's to keep your eyes open and pay attention to what's happening right now. There's a fly walking down, watch it. These two things. This is why Buddhism creates two systems of logic. One of them reduces every statement you make to absurdity. Any statement you make, it will question you to the point you don't know what you're talking about. On the premise that if I reduce everything you say to absurdity, you will finally quit doing it. The moment you quit doing that, this will accept. But that's what it does. That's why the professor asked me, "What are you?" Crazy name. I'm a sensei from America. But those are labels. I'm asking, what is this? So I said, "I'm my mother's son." "You idiot. I didn't ask you about how you related to some woman. What is this?" You can't answer. But that's what he asked us. Week after week after week, we went crazy. One time, that close to killing him, he was so insistent, he asked the whole class, "All right, you, Makatari, you idiot. And we couldn't see. But he said, "Am I wrong?" And we couldn't. We were. And then something happened. He laughed. And it broke everything. All tension was gone. And then we used to go after his class to a place called Rosa's Coffee Shop. Except in the back we served beer. So we had beer, trying to figure out what this guy is getting at. When he laughed, that day he went out and ordered 2 rounds of beer, we figured out the final answer. We thought. So when the final time came, we wrote it down, and sure enough, that was it. The answer was, you can't answer, he's saying, why can't you answer? It took us that long to figure out because there is no such thing. We're composite. And outside of that, you can't talk about yourself. And yet, we cling to this as if it were real, ultimately real, time and space. And you can't even tell anybody that we were right. Finally, my other foreign student classes, they did it half the time. He wouldn't give us nothing. He wouldn't give us anything. But a very good teacher. A very good teacher in that way. So that's what it is. We're not about goodness, truth, and light. Love is very problematic. You know the word I, the kanji I? Until my generation in Japan, this was not a positive word. So Aiko was not a good name for a girl because it meant lustful child. I meant love. That kind of thing. So it had a very negative connotation in this religion. The character that took his place was Jihi, right, which meant commiseration, empathy for, but not love. Love meant basically had a much stronger sexual connotation. So I was not used. Now it's used to mean love because of Christian. They use that character to mean agape. But before it wasn't. It was very negative. So it comes from a very different place. And my trip to Bhutan is 3 times. Those 3 trips made Buddhism so clear, much clearer than ever before. And they weren't even aware of it. I just talked to them and asked them questions. And their attitude was just, it was right on. And I'm sure it was unconscious. Here I am consciously trying to lead, but they're unconscious. You want to slap them. And it was a real experience. It was a real, take sense that was take it to the time. Right? Trust me. The Bhutanese are very smart. You have to pay $250 a day, and you cannot go by yourself. You have to have a guide. But it includes room, board, and transportation. So that's not bad. They don't want you walking around without a guide. And they'll take you wherever you want to go. Take sense that trust, it will change your view of Buddhism. It will. Because it's not theoretical anymore. It's not emotional. Oh. It's just very straightforward, very practical. It's right. And they're disarming. Love, I don't like this word. Love. They're tough. They used to walk. Except that when he was a kid, it took 8 hours to walk to school one way. So he would go on a Monday and stay at the school until Friday and walk back home. And the part of Bhutan where he is, there is no horizontal. Everything is either up or it's down. There is no level land. And that's what they did. And yet he's gentle soul. I mean, it's disarming. And what we consider good service, he just considers, of course you do that. One of our people got cramps coming down from a very long walk. So one of the bus drivers put him on his back 5 times and put him about at least a mile and brought him down the hill. And our guy said, oh, thank you so much. He said, that's not your problem. You just consider that what you do. But they're very, go, take sense of go. It's really will change your view and make you appreciate what comes from you. Ours is a mixture of both, which is okay. But a lot of times it clashes. Things like you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. That's true, and everything else in between also is true. It's not that simple. And there's no good and bad. I'm in a good phase or I'm in a bad phase. But there is no bad person or a good person. We're all in these phases. There's 6 of them that are described in detail. And they're right on. They're right on in terms of your emotional life. The Buddhist analysis, I think, is we think too much of ourselves. So don't think so positive. It's not. Throw in a little negative once in a while. Do balance, because both of them are necessary. You must have the world of delusion and the world of enlightenment. You can't have one without the other. But at the same time, your egocentric world is not really real. Even though you act in your everyday life is the only thing that is real. It's not. And to think that it is that much prevents you from really enjoying life. Enjoying life is to enjoy other people, the connection to everything else. That's what the definition of enjoyment is. You see that you're connected. Whether you like it or not, even connected. That's why. No, I'm telling you this because I don't care, because I'm retired. Fire. No temple in their right mind should run a temple like a business. This is not a business. You cannot. If you don't like what your mother's doing, you can't fire her. In a business, you can. That's why the business is a business. This is a family. You can't fire each other. You got to deal with each other. So my 45-year fight with Virginia, I love to do. Every February, I just badmouth them for the heaven, just to keep them honest. Because there's always somebody vying for queen of the kitchen or empress of cooking, right? If they were that good, they'd have a restaurant. It's good, but it ain't that. And tastes change anyway. Everything changes. Why should that be permanent? And those of you who are over 60, this is your major concern. How to let go. It is hard. I just retired. I'm still going to tell you. I cannot give that thing up. It's hard. But if you're over 60, you have to learn to let it go. And other people can do it. And guess what? They can probably do it just as well as you. Maybe not better, but just as good. Right? So your kids are gone. Your wife's going to outlive your husband. You got money? Spend it. Don't give it to your grandkids. They already make more than you do now. Spend that money and enjoy it. Right? If you have to go on a cruise, go on a cruise, come back, and then volunteer for some public thing and get in contact with people again. That's what you should. Spend it. If anybody deserves the money they work for, it's you guys. Really? Don't give it away. Use it. My temple, a lot of temples in Southern California, when they reach retirement age, about 60% volunteer for some kind of work. We have 3 ministers in Southern District who work at the airport. What do you call it? The welcoming groups. They tell them, how to get to where things are. And because they speak Japanese, they hang out for their Japanese classmates. And they all volunteer. Mori Sensei wanted to find out how to tell people how to use the metro line. So he wrote the metro line just to find out, so he experienced it. And he said he had a great time just talking to people. And he says, even Chinese people came up, we didn't understand each other, but we did. We went, oh, take this one, right. And it was a great time. That's what you do. That's what you do. Otherwise, you sit home on your back with a can of beer and then switch it to a TV set. And you can't do that more than 3 hours a day. You'll die. You got to get out and do something. So it's that. And the connectedness of things is the reality of things. The more you're connected to the reality of things, the less suffering you have. Even though what was suffering to you before, you still do. It's less. It's nothing now. It's like, oh, here I go again. You catch yourself doing that. And it's funny now instead of, ooh. It's funny. And And you get two of those people together, it's hilarious. You get a whole Fujinkai group together, it's a comedy routine, you know. It's great time. So a temple is a family. It cannot be run as a business. And anybody who insists that it be run out of business should be run out of the temple. Get rid of it. He's going to destroy you. He's going to kill you. You're not bad. Can't fire your mother because she's not a good cook anymore. You say, oh, it's good, Mom. My wife's mother, as she grew older, she lost her taste buds. So her food got saltier and saltier, right? More shoyu, more salt. So we sent my daughter at Shogatsu time to live with her. And she stopped her from putting salt in shoyu. So we went for Shogatsu, we said, ah, it's good, and meant it. It was good because my daughter stopped her from putting all that salt in. We all get that way. Sooner or later, you know. Don't you catch yourself putting more salt on your food as you get older? I do. Not for Hiroshima myself, you know. But it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing. Every age has something nature to do. And ours is to die, to look at death and to look at it well, and to show our kids. There are 5 people now, 5 people now at my temple who are close to death. Right? And they are having such a good time, and their grandkids are watching them. They're giving them treasures that will last those grandkids a lifetime. They're showing them how to live and to die. And it's an incredible thing to see. Our group is taking a dance troupe in Bugaku and Barangaracha into the dance to Hawaii, to the Honolulu Wrestling, and hook up with the hula groups there to do a benefit program for the Pacific Academy, which is the only Jodo Shinshu public school from kindergarten to high school. So we're doing a benefit for them. So we're all getting ready to go there in December. So these ladies heard about it. And they said, Hawaii, huh? Yeah, they're 83, I think. 83, 84. He said, I know, Sensei, I know it's an excuse, but can we go too? They're going. We have about 7 or 8 over 83 Fujinka ladies who are pulling out their old plastic ladies, that kind of some moo-moos, and they're going to go. So I said, okay, you can go, but you can't go with us because we have to perform. So we'll hook you up with the Indian dance troupe. Their parents want to go too. So I said, we're going to put you together and you go on your own tour and you come to our concert. I said, okay. These ladies are Yankee, boy. They're really Yankee. Not only physically, here, they're sharp. They really are. And they're very natural. Look at me, I'm falling apart, so I should go now, right? Don't you think? Right? That's how they con us into letting them go. They're really good at it. You know? And it's wonderful to be in that kind of a family. And that's what every family should be. Every temple family should be that way. Cracking up on each other, helping each other, of course. And helping each other, holding the mirror up before you see. I can't make you see. I can hold up the mirror and you can hold it. It's the only place that happens. You can't force somebody to see this stuff, but you can help them look at it. And then when they look at it, they're clear. Even for a little moment, they're clear. That moment is everything. That moment is everything. That's all we're about, I think. Now we have to translate all of this into these images here. That human being, that human figure, represents that ultimate reality. What do you want, a frog? We're human beings. Of course it's going to be human form. But there is no such thing as that. It represents the reality that everything is connected. If you were a frog, you would be a frog up there. But you're not. You're a human being. Put a human being up there. How many of you have prayed to that? Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Right? No, it doesn't occur to us to pray to that. Most of us don't even look at it, right? You look at Ocean, wow, you don't look at it. I asked my temple, how many of you know what he looks like? Nobody. I said, you know, our statue has a mustache and a goatee. They went, what? You don't have a mustache and a goatee. Yes, he does. Nah. So I think when you take off the shoes, they all went up. Sure enough. Mustache and a goatee. I don't know, this one has. Some of them do, some of them don't. It's very strange. So it's not, is this real or not real? It's always, what does this mean? Eh? What does this mean, this statue? What does it mean to a shoulder? And only one page instead of 3 pages. You don't have to write it into your forehead, right? Everything up here has some connection to the fact that everything is connected to everything. And the only thing that prevents you from seeing that is your own ego that considers itself separate from everything else. Once you forget that, and that connection takes place, it takes place in spite of you, not because of you. And because it takes place in spite of you, it is the ultimate joyful thing. And it only lasts that long. It's not forever. You are not floating on the air and following. It's just split second and it's gone. Because you have to get back to wonderful me. One of our professors did this. He said, Buddhism is very simple. To show you what you look like. I'm going to show you. You want to do this.
We're quick. He says, well, what do you think? He says, that's kind of creepy. He says, why? We all look like this. You're pointing at her saying she looks like that, but not you, right? We all look like this. We all do this all the time. And we don't know it. We don't know it. Every once in a while, on Metro, you're going to do this and look in the mirror. Right? That moment is awakening. You're wide open. That moment, for all its ugliness, is a great moment. It's a great moment. Right? That's a great moment. So if you dance more and don't think of the day, you are not dancing. You're showing off. You're being discussion, but you're not dancing. Dancing is to remember the dead and say, thank you. To really recognize it's here, right now. Always. As long as you suck air. Bachan is there, Chichan is there, everybody else is there. But you're too busy trying to look good in your brand new Kodani you brought to show off. You're not going to remember Chichan Bachan. You have to forget that. That's why Sama Mama can say, come as you are. It's not a welcoming gesture. It says you have to come as you are. You cannot come any other way. And yet it's the most difficult thing to do. But it happens when you forget everything, right? So the more you say, don't do that, you're doing it. When that moment comes, it's almost by accident. You just and there it is. And then it's gone. Well, it's gone. This is called dying. And the most important part of living is just dying. Everything's dying, right? Check this out. Right? It was vibrant, jet black before. Look at this. Oh, how you did. Right? Every time I comb my hair, there's a little stuff in it. That's dying. Right? But I don't care. It feels so good not to care about things that don't matter. You don't have to worry about it. When I turned 60, I start leaving my zipper down. I forget to zip up. And if you're in a public place, you can't zip up because everyone knows you're down. Right? So you just have to leave it there. I did it today at the airport. Jeffrey was waiting for me at the back. And I went, oh shoot, my zipper's back. And he can't tell unless I sit in the car, right? So I don't see that first sense, but when I got to the car, I went. But it's such a relief not to worry about it, right? Before you're just kind of frozen, right? But after 60, don't worry about that kind of thing. People walk around all day with this. Or you don't have to dye your hair after a certain point. Let it go, you look much better. Yeah, that kind of thing. So if you don't have a sense of age and growing old and approaching death, you don't have this kind of vibrant life. Oh!
You don't have that kind of really being alive. Because death is a real part of it. That's gone. What's coming? It's watching a flicker movie right here. Everything comes and goes right here. If you can let that favorite frame go, it gets really interesting. Everything is new. Almost everything. And none of it is particularly useful. It goes from useful to just beautiful. I told Cynthia this. You're going to be shocked, I think. We have a court orchestra and dance group, Gahaku and Buddha. And our Buddha costumes are 50 years old. They're falling apart. So we want to buy two pair dance. So we've got two costumes. The main part of the costume, the upper and the long hakama. These four pieces come to $38,000 and to have it made in Japan. Right? And so we said, no one's going to donate for that. I could buy a car for that price. Right? So we talked about it. And that day, a man came up to me and gave me a check for $10,000. And he said, if it's for this, I'll donate. If you use this to buy a new refrigerator, I want my money back. Right? This is very odd, don't you think? But for us, it isn't. This man is willing to pay for sheer beauty. Not a multi-purpose hall, just a temple. And a lot of people who are affected by this so-called religion move from utility to sheer beauty. And this is why death is such a beautiful thing in Japanese tradition. Aki, fall, when the leaves turn red and die and drop, is considered the most beautiful time in nature. Cherry blossoms tree. Yeah. Get drunk and go home. Right? But Momichi, the maple leaf, is considered beautiful. Sakura is kirei, pretty. Momichi is utsukushi, it's beautiful. And it's the time of death. You know why? Cherry blossoms flutter on the wind. Maple leaves, they just drop. And when they drop, they show the back and the front. They hide nothing in dying. And that's the beauty of it. There's no pretense. They sing exactly what it is. And anybody who can do that, or even approaches them, has this beauty of the fall. It's urasabushi, incredibly beautiful thing. That's why the Japanese love the fall more than any other time of the year. It's considered the most beautiful. The old members of our temple will pay for the beauty. It's the lucky youngsters come for the kids. I want this to go to that costume. So we had a couple of sales and we raised $28,000. We're 10,000 short. So we're going to have a concert, and it's not a rummage sale. We're asking people to give one of their prized possessions at a sale. It's not going to be cheap because they know it's for this costume. So that's what we're going to do. And we'll probably give it. So we're going to spend $38,000 for two costumes. And they're gorgeous. They're just the most, you can stand them up with nobody in it and it's beautiful. It's just very this costs a fortune. Just this simple halter costs a fortune. Why do you pay for this? You can get a Danish modern version, right? Cheap. But they don't. We pay that money for the sheer beauty. Why? Because it says when you're connected to reality, it is simply beautiful. Even dying, death is beautiful. Dying not so beautiful. How you die is a problem. But death is beautiful, as much as life is beautiful. So we don't go. We embrace them, and by doing so, it becomes whole, without already bumping down on the whole thing. And that's what we talk about all the time. It's dying out, I think. And that's unfortunate. We need to revive it amongst the next generations as well. Remember, I don't know if I told you last time, our young people still grow up this way in terms of funeral, because they all do a show called representing somebody and seeing a dead person. Right? And so at a large conference, I said, okay, don't think, just shout out your answer. What's the most fun part about our funeral? And they all shouted out the same word without thinking. They said, China Meshi, Chinese food. Why? Because after a funeral, you go out and eat Chinese food. Right? And you go out and celebrate that person's death. You don't celebrate it at a funeral. Funeral is mourning. And so we've always celebrated that person's death at eating China Mission. And at that place, some people are crying, some people are laughing, and everything in between. It is the most natural of things. It is not a eulogy. Eulogy is half truth. Just the good parts, right? At a real otoki, you're talking about a real human being. Why we need to call our funerals a celebration is beyond me. It's not a celebration. The otoki is a celebration. The funeral is to mourn somebody that is very close to you and always will be a part of your life. If you can't mourn for one day in one ritual, there's something wrong with it. And don't parade your little bratty grandkids and give an ambulance. That's a shibaya for your ego benefit. It's not good. It's not good. It happens to be the latest thing in Protestant churches now. That's why they're copying in LA. That's a different attitude entirely. So eulogy wasn't even a part of Buddhist tradition. Some Nisei mistranslated choji, the Japanese choji, he translated it as eulogy. It does not mean eulogy at all. It means koyami no kotoba. It means words of condolence. It doesn't mean eulogy. Right? And eulogy cannot be Buddhist because it's the half-truth. It's a good part of this verse only. And that's not true of any human being. If you want to talk about a real human being, you have to want everything. That's why I've only done one real, complete Buddhist funeral in my 45-year period. It was early on by Hawaiians, of all people. I went to the mortuary to do a funeral. And I thought a luau was going on. Everyone had muumuus on, they, Hawaiian aloha shirts, right? And half were barefoot. Right? Someone, is this the funeral? I said, yeah. So I go back and changing. And these two Samoan guys, big guys, in white, complete white coat. No shoes, barefoot. These guys were so big they blocked out the sun. I mean, they were huge guys. So they come to my room and say, "Are you the sensei?" I went, "Yeah, I think so." They said, "Okay, sensei, we're going to start pretty soon. Give me 5 minutes. I'll make them all quiet and I'll call you." I said, okay. So I go. So he said, "Okay, everybody shut up, yeah? We're going to start the funeral for Tanto." Tanto was the guy who died. His nickname, right? And he said, "Hey, everybody shut up, you. You shut up, you. We're going to start." "Okay, sensei, come on down." So I come down. And I'm sitting, I'm chanting in the bedroom with Shoko. And I look at the program, and it has 3 eulogies on it. It's going to take ever. The time for the eulogy. This guy gets up, and I swear to you, this is what he said. He said, "Tonto was my best friend." Right? He always got a bad temper, short temper. We always end up in jail somehow. We go out to drink, we always end up in jail somehow. But he had a heart of gold. "My good friend, thank you." And he sits down. It was like 30 seconds. Right? I'm going, "Oh know what the second guy's going to say. And the other two got up and said, it was only about a minute and a half. But they gave you a complete picture of who this guy was. I didn't know who he was. But by that time, I was looking at him going, hey, he's a pretty interesting guy. And it was. They made him a real human being. Now I got to get up and give a sermon to these people, right? And so I was feeling pretty good. So I was giving one of these sermons. And the second row, or third row, behind the family, were three elegant Hawaiian ladies in muumuus. The three of them filled up the entire pew. They were huge, like mountains. Mountains of muumuu brocade. They were gorgeous. And I'm giving my sermon, and they're going, yeah. They're going to on my sermon, right? So I'm on the roll. And then the big Samoan guys come and say, okay, this is the shaji. I said, thank you for all you guys coming, yeah? So we're going to thank you real Hawaiian stuff. The Tapa said that will be good. So nobody leave. We're going to cross the street to the 442 hall. And everybody's going to have a little out there and eat. Nobody sneak away. Yeah. So they have people lined up. So when you left the door, you had to cross the street. You go to the hall. You couldn't leave. And they partied for the rest of the evening. That was the best funeral I ever did. That sounds funny, but it was. They were talking, they were sad about a real human being. And then they went across the street and had a delight. They danced, they sang, and they talked about what a terrible person Papa was, and he would give you a shut off his back. They were really celebrating and really mourning. This is how it should be. And it should be real. It should not be pretentious at all. And it's not a time to flaunt your kids to a captive audience. That's what you do at a wedding. That's why Buddhists never did weddings. It was clean for a day. If anything was an egocentric practice, it's a wedding. Right? So the Buddhists never did weddings, never came here. And they insisted on it, so we had to create one. Now it's starting, down south anyway, it's starting to creep into the funeral right. And we're saying, no, you can't do that. No. It's not on your terms. It's on ours. Because your parents and your grandparents had the right attitude about death and dying. They were right. They were absolutely right. We're not going to give that up because you want to flaunt your kids. So, no shibai. No shibai. Bon is like that. You start off as shibai and end up just dancing. And when you end up just dancing, you remember the dead. You do. You do. And people you don't even think you would remember. Papa. Friends. Even enemies, Papa. And you say, thank you. If it weren't for you, you scuzzball, I wouldn't be what I am. You're still thanking. And that's what it is. That's what Obon is. It's much deeper than just dressing up some pretty girls so everyone else will come by and invite you to Teliana. It's a real dance of death. A gathering of joy. Our dance of death is a gathering of joy. That's why in a couple of years we're going to meet with there's a Zapotec community in Los Angeles, a large southern Mexico Indian community. And we're going to celebrate Obon and the Day of the Dead together. Hopefully at a cemetery. We're going to dance at the cemetery. Because their idea of Day of the Dead is very similar. It's to remember the dead, except they have souls coming back, but it's to remember the dead because it invigorates the living. It makes them really alive. So we're trying to have something together. We tried it 10 years ago when they just came. They said, oh yeah, we'd like to have it, but one problem since then. I said, what? They said, nobody died yet. We got the cemetery. Now they have, so we can do it. So, but it's that kind of thing. It's very different point of view. It's just one organism. One. The whole universe is one organism, and it's connected.